Hey guys, Coach Tim here with another episode of Managing the Madness, and I'm here with one of my favorite longtime athletes. It's Sophie Taylor. Sophie, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm very good. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too. We
Yeah.
haven't seen each other very much in the past few years.
I know. So we will start this off today with a little bit of a background, just so everybody can get to know you a little bit before we kind of dive a little bit deeper. So chronologically, or kind of how we came to know each other, give us a little bit of background on kind of who you are, where you grew up, what you did, stuff like that.
Awesome. So I started playing soccer, everyone starts playing soccer when they're about 4. But as soon as it was possible for me to play at a higher level, I did.
Yeah.
So started with Lone Star at Academy.
Okay.
And then continued with Lone Star all the way through high school, going through the process of ECNL, and I think there was SCL before that.
Yeah.
And they didn't even have DA yet when I was playing, so didn't go through that process. But I was a play-up when I was like 8 or 9.
Okay.
And then I went back to my own age group.
Gotcha.
Through that time, I played at Vista Ridge High School.
Okay.
And then I went on and committed my junior year to play soccer at Auburn. And I played there for 2 years.
Okay.
So I met you, I think we were just saying, about 8 years old.
Yeah.
I knew I wanted to play college soccer at a very young age, so we kind of took all the possible steps that we could to make that happen.
Yeah.
So we started training with a soccer ball, I think I was 8.
Yeah.
And then it started working into not just training with the soccer ball, but building my mobility and strength to be able to get to that level that I wanted to be at. So then you became like my full-time, I just followed you, I think, wherever you went. So then you became my full-time trainer, and it obviously really worked because it helped me get to where I wanted to get to.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. It was. I still remember that there were you and Sabrina. That was the first session that I think, having moved here, I'd been here for probably from Dallas to Austin, and probably I've been here for maybe 2 years, maybe 2 or 3 years. And then started working for a company here, and you and Sabrina were like, I think, one of my first sessions that I ever did for that company. As it was kind of merging from one thing to the next, it was a soccer place, and it kind of became a training place with both sports specific, like physical training and soccer training. And I remember you guys were my first session at his place, at the gym's place. And as we grew, as you grew and as we kind of you got older, I remember got really close with your dad and your mom, and I remember telling your dad at one point, I said, I can change careers, or if I wanted to change careers, I can change careers when you graduate. For some reason, because you were the first person I worked with, even at that little of an age, and then I got to know you guys and your whole family so well. It was a milestone when you graduated and went to college, because you were the first person I worked with having moved here, and then we kept, like you said, kind of off and on throughout your whole career of being a youth athlete. Like, we kept working together, we kept staying together, and I got to know you guys so well that it was a big deal for me personally when you graduated and you got your ride. So it was lots of fun.
It was very fun. Yeah. And also, you ended up training both my parents, I think, at some point.
Yeah.
And my sister, I think, even attempted once. It did not go well.
She did, yeah.
But she tried.
Yeah.
So.
It was not her bag. It was definitely not her bag. No. That's okay. That's totally fine. So let's speak to a little bit of the soccer specific stuff. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about kind of your soccer journey within youth soccer, as far as play up is a big deal. I think play ups were obviously and it still happens today, but you're playing up as a year younger on a team that's older than you. Talk to me a little bit about the first time that happened. Was that 9, 10 years old? Was that a little bit older? And then kind of morphing into a little bit more bigger kind of view on club soccer, the demands and stuff like that, what you felt with it.
Yeah, so I think, I don't remember the exact age, but I think I was probably about 9 years old. So I was a 98 birth year.
Yep.
And so I was playing up with the 97s. Yep. Which was why I was training with Sabrina. She's a year older.
Yep.
So at the time, Lone Star was still red, white, blue, orange. They didn't have all the technical names, and so I was playing up a year on the white team, which at the time was the second team.
Yeah.
And I remember I could tell that I was challenged because I was very small. But it put me in a position that when I did decide to go back to my own age group, that I felt like I was more prepared.
Yep.
So I think I was on that team for 2 years.
Okay.
And then I decided to go back with the 98s, and that's when I think it became the 98 red ECNL.
Something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And they had created like a whole new development to prepare, kids for our age.
Yep.
So once we got into that program, I feel like it became even more real. So I was just talking about this the other day. We were training from 8 to 9:30, 3 days a week.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how on earth did my body do that?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So we would have training 3 days a week. I think I was here at least one of those days or 2 days.
Yeah, at least
maybe.
once or twice, depending upon the time of the year.
Yeah,
I think we were doing that. Yeah.
Sometimes you would come out and train us at whatever facility we were at.
Yep.
And then as I continued to grow up, we became into the ECNL program.
Yeah.
And so every weekend in the ECNL program, we're the only team based in Austin. And so we were traveling every single weekend, or we had back-to-back games. One weekend we'd be in Houston, in Oklahoma in the same weekend. And we traveled. So on top of that, then you were trying to manage, your body, being able to play, and then your schoolwork.
Yep.
So it definitely prepared you for the college level. I would say it was Lone Star especially. Really, really, if that's what you wanted to do, they prepared you for that. And so I think that I would have been shell-shocked in college if I hadn't gone through that whole process.
Sure.
So
what, I guess, from a personal standpoint, did you feel like there were things you had to kind of give up or kind of minimize in your life to make sure that you got, put in the effort of time that you felt necessary to do the next thing or to move to the next level, like as far as from a social standpoint or things like that?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think always at a young age, I prioritized sports too. So like if it was going to some social event or you had a game, it was always obviously choosing a soccer game.
Yeah.
And then as you get older, it takes up your entire weekends and after schools. And so even through college, your social life, it's definitely not as much as probably any other person.
Yeah.
So you had to make decisions on what you wanted to do, and I ultimately always just chose soccer.
Yeah.
So
and probably, was it or wasn't hard?
Oh, it was definitely hard.
Yeah.
To miss out on a lot of things.
Got it.
Family things, friend things, any of it was very tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. How were your parents during this time? Like as far as, supportive? Give me a few kind of just general ideas on things you remember from their kind of, I guess, their situations where how they would manage you, how they would take time away from their lives for you, kind of generally speak to like their involvement with who drove, like who, did you guys have snacks in the car, like kind of like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so they were always very supportive and they knew what I wanted to do ultimately.
Yeah.
So they were just there to encourage me and support me and push me when I needed to be pushed. So I remember like when I first started playing like high level soccer, I'd have practice right at 5 o'clock. So it was 5 to 6:30.
Yep.
And my mom would pick me up from school. She'd have snacks in the car, or we'd stop somewhere and get snacks. We'd go straight to Town and Country, and we'd have practice. And then as I got older, my dad would be the one to take me typically. And my dad also coached, so he was all about soccer all the time anyway.
Yeah.
And so, they would always be there for me in every sense of it. They pushed me for sure when I was hesitant to do things.
Yeah.
The social aspect, they knew ultimately what my goal was.
Sure.
To go to school and play college soccer. And so if it was up for debate on choosing this versus choosing soccer, they did encourage me to choose the soccer route.
Sure.
Which I am grateful for because then I probably wouldn't have been where I was.
Well, they just constantly kind of kept you on your North Star, right? Like, because again, I think as a kid, and you have influences from your friends and stuff like that and from other, kind of people that if they know that ultimately this is your goal and you're frustrated or tired at a certain point, then and you want to kind of veer off, I want to do this instead. Well, is that the choice you really want to make based on the fact that we know for a fact that this is your number one thing, this is your North Star that we're kind of putting things towards and just kind of nudging you along whenever maybe the path veered, you're like, okay, I'm just gonna
Yeah.
get someone checking me back into that same spot. You know?
Yeah. My dad was also, when I first started, when I was playing up, my dad was the parent coach.
Yeah, I remember. So, yeah.
So
I can
he
bet,
actually did a really good job of like a boundary between, like he never tried to coach me. I mean, they're called a parent coach, but they were basically just like the coach's assistant. So he was James's assistant.
Yeah.
But he did a really good job of like navigating like being my dad versus being there to do what he's supposed to do.
Sure.
So
I really enjoyed
it's really
coaching.
funny to think back that he, and you know, still to this day he would love to be a parent coach for
Oh,
anybody.
I bet he would. No, I really because I remember we coached in junior academy at the same time when you were growing up, and I really enjoyed coaching with your dad. It was a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun together. He still says Coach Tim when he answers the phone when I call him. Or that's still what he called, and I still say the same thing to him. And we haven't, neither one of us have done it for years. So like, it was a really good special time working with him. I really enjoyed it a lot. For sure.
And then when we got into like ECNO and stuff, he was usually the one to travel with me.
Sure.
We got lots of travel points. We would usually find like another family if we were driving to Corporal with, or like, you know, we'd book the same flights if we're going to Oklahoma and things like that. But he was usually the one to go with me through all of that because he also just like knew the most about what was going on with travel sports and such.
Well, at that point, it becomes a whole other animal, right? Yeah. Like you have so much more going on, I think, from the travel standpoint, the schedule standpoint, the demands on you physically, and you know, even from a competitive standpoint, the teams you're playing, the level of preparation I think you guys got as you got older, especially towards the end when you're older and in high school, it's just, I don't think parents understand sometimes there's a lot that goes into it on the back end before the game actually even happens.
Yes.
Wes is coming in saying so many things to you guys at that point, you know, that the parents probably have no idea that's actually happening. Right. And the way a game, especially a soccer game, progresses over time, where it's heavily just technical, can you control a soccer ball at a 10-year-old, 11-year-old level, to the tactics that become the number one thing. And not just individual, but like big group, small group, 2 or 3 players in this area, 9, 10, 11 players in the field. The preparation that goes into your practices and your, you know, kind of like pre-game and even like during the weekends, like, you know, kind of meetings and stuff like that on those trips, it's a lot. It's a ton of work, and I agree with you. It probably was a perfect preparation for college.
It was, especially like, you know, when you're traveling, we're missing the high school football games, and we're missing the basketball games, and you know, there were themes, and you know, you definitely had to give up a lot of things, and they were, especially my parents were very supportive in that. If I was upset about it, they were there when I needed them. Yeah. Because I knew what I needed to choose, which was to go and play this weekend. Yeah. It was never even up for debate. Yeah. It was always just like, oh, we have a big game this weekend. We're going to Houston. Here we go again. Yeah. But there were definitely some times where it was harder to be like, okay, here we go again. Another weekend on the road. Yeah. Well, so you mentioned high school. I know you played high school too, right? And it's funny because youth soccer has gone through a few phases where at one point if you played that level, you could play high school, and then you couldn't play high school, and then you could. Right. It's kind of gone back and forth with U.S. soccer and high school soccer requirements. So speak to that a little bit, the differences you see, and again, between high school soccer, club soccer, how your parents were in those situations. But I guess first, differences, I think, between the programs and stuff like that, and what you liked, didn't like, between those two different programs. Yeah, so I'm really grateful that the rules were still as they were when I played, because high school soccer was like taking what I loved about the sport and you just got to play. It didn't matter, you know, and you were playing with your best friends because they were in your school. So, and I had a really fun coach. She made it fun. It wasn't too serious, but it was serious enough that we still did well. So it was still high level. Luckily, we were at a school where we were still playing good soccer. We had a lot of Lone Star players. but it wasn't as tedious as playing club. So it wasn't, I mean, we had practices after school.
Yeah.
And then we had games, I think it was Fridays and Tuesdays maybe.
Yeah, that sounds right, yeah.
But during that time period, we weren't playing club. That was kind of our off season. So it balanced out. And I would say that was a perfect balance between club soccer because it is so intense.
Yep.
To still be able to play and train and you're still in shape.
Yep.
But you're just getting to enjoy the sport and you're just really having fun doing it. And I know that my parents loved, it's just, even for them, they can feel the tension of playing a club sport versus in high school it's February and 30 degrees and freezing and they have their parkas and they're in the stands. It's just the whole environment is just fun.
Yeah.
And I think that that's kind of what got me through a lot of those tough club parts of it was that we had those breaks and people got to come to now our games.
Yeah.
Like all of our friends who didn't play soccer got to come and watch high school and it just became more of like, oh, this is why I like to play this sport again.
Yeah.
Just the atmosphere of playing under stadium lights and everything is really fun.
Well, I think that's a good point because that's also in a way kind of a preparation for college because the environment is so much different, right?
Yes.
Like, especially as you guys progressed, I think, was that your senior year you guys went to state?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right? So, you know, the club game is you have your parents sitting in chairs on the sideline, right? And there might be 30, 40 people there.
Yeah.
And, you know, especially as you move on towards, you know, playoffs and like stuff like that with a high school scenario, you're playing in a big stadium or at least a stadium of sorts where you have lights, you're playing at night. You have that similar, and there's arguably more people there, right? And so, and you have that environment and that kind of, that looks a little bit more like college soccer does.
Yes.
Right? So like even, because I think that could be a massive, you know, kind of surprise that you step out in the field at the college field for the first time and you're like, oh, there's bleachers and there's 300 people here.
Yes.
And they've never done that before if you haven't had some experience of a high level, you know, high school program, right? That's gone on to state and you've seen, I remember that state game. That state game was tons of people.
Oh yeah. They bussed people from our high school over to the game so students could come to the game.
Yeah.
And like another thing is, in college too, there's rivalries. You have rivalries in high school. There's not so much rivalries in club sports. You don't have other kids heckling you. You know, like Vista Ridge always played Cedar Park. And so the Cedar Park fans, when we played there, were always just yelling at you from the field. And so when you go to college, and especially at Auburn, you know, we have Alabama. It's our big rivalry. So when you go to Alabama to play and, you know, they have drums playing, like they're trying to psych you out. And having that part of it too, I think is very beneficial because, you know, you get that in high school, prepares you for when you're in college.
Yeah, but there's no one heckling you on the sidelines at a club game.
No.
There's
maybe,
not,
maybe once in a blue moon there's a parent, but.
A single person
one mom.
That one
but
woman or man who doesn't get it really,
It's pretty quiet at a club game.
Yeah. That's a good point. I actually had not thought of that way, that it would prepare you a little bit more for college like that too.
Yeah, I have a specific memory of a girl on my high school team. She like fake tanned herself and they would scream at her that she looked like a Cheeto. And I'm like, I will never forget that because I feel like if that was me, I was like, well, how do you come back from that?
How do you feel about that?
But then going into college, you know, you don't even know what you're going to hear in the stands. Because college fans are brutal too. So I definitely think that was a big part of it that helped prepare me, and I'm sure anybody else who went through both of that.
That's really cool. Yeah. I would like to talk about a little bit of the fall season, right? Because spring season, you're in season for high school. You're shut down for club, right? But in the fall, you've got club, full swing, but you're also, because high school soccer is a class, you're enrolled in that class already, so you're training double effectively, depending upon what, you know, your high school coach chooses to do. And I knew your high school coach, and I remember having conversations with her over the years and making the point, because she had also coached for Lone Star very early and very, very short time, and I made the point to me that I can't treat this like Lone Star. I can't treat this program like Lone Star, because if I do, they'll quit. They're not here for the same reasons. And, you know, like, so she had to manage it a little bit. But I'm always curious to hear about how athletes manage themselves when you've got basically, when it does overlap. When it doubles up and all of a sudden now you're up, you've got a full 8-hour day at school, you go right to afternoon practice at high school, or you practice in the morning, whichever one your schedule was. And then you go, that night into maybe a training session with me, and then you're onto the field for 2 hours at a high level with massive intensity and massive intent. Right. So how did you manage the fall? Like, how, as far as, keeping your body fit and physically capable? Not to mention you've got class as well.
I think we were very lucky that we had her as our coach because she did understand the balance, and we had many high-level club players that, like, we had a long weekend of soccer. On Monday, we'd be like, listen, and she'd be like, why don't you guys just walk today?
Yeah.
So she was very supportive in that. But in the fall, during the off season, typically, our last period in high school was soccer.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember the exact schedule, but I'm pretty sure like Mondays and Wednesdays were weightlifting, running, our physical fitness days.
Sure.
And then Tuesday, Thursdays was soccer training
on the ball,
during off season.
Yeah.
We started high school season, even though our first real games weren't until I think January 3rd or something.
Mm-hmm.
Right after Thanksgiving break was when we started like our season. So realistically, you have September, October, and a little bit of November without having after school practices, but you still were during the day training or practicing. Yeah. So I was practicing or doing some sort of...
You're physically active, right?
Yes. Yeah. Probably 2 to 3 times a day.
Yes.
Every single day.
Yes.
Unless we had one off day for club, but then usually I was here or...
Yeah. That's when you fill in the blank with the thing you need to be doing to take your game to the next level, right? Yeah.
So, especially as I got older, every day was something. Really, your only off day was Friday, but you were preparing your body for Saturday because you had a game. Yeah. And then in high school season, luckily, you were playing on a Friday, so you would have Saturday, Sunday to recover. Yeah. So the fall was definitely, I think, the hardest time of the year. Yeah. Because your body was just so physically exhausted. Absolutely. On top of schoolwork. Yeah. Yeah. But I will say, the fall is when you have college soccer. Yeah. So it is once again helpful that I went through that prior to, so that I understood what it felt like to do that in college. Because all those workouts together was about what you did being a part of a college soccer. That's good. That's very fair point. Yeah, because you're in the weight room, obviously you're doing those things. Yeah, that's very fair. I always find it a struggle with that time of year, especially for my soccer athletes. I try to hammer into them how much food they should be eating, how much the off the field, out of the weight room kind of, these are the things that are going to allow you to continue to do what you want to do at the level you want to do it at. Because I think sometimes, and part of the whole point behind the podcast is giving parents the ideas, maybe they're missing, or they're not really kind of uncertain, they're so uncertain of this, you're probably burning in that situation upwards of 4,000 calories a day with being young, having a high metabolism, now adding, sometimes 2 or 3 hours intermittently, across the day, sometimes even more than that of activity, physical activity. And if you're only eating so much, then you can't do that forever, or you're just going to crash. Right. So that's for me, I want to make sure that when I know that I've got soccer kids in that time frame and they're kind of overlapping with both, that they're taking care of themselves enough to be able to function, because too little food coming in and too little sleep coming in, and you're not going to be able to function the way you want to function. Right. It's just not possible. So I think it's a good thing that nowadays there's so many resources for finding, I don't know if it's dietitian or nutritionist, things like that. Yeah. But I do remember I'd come home from school, I'd eat, and then I'd go to practice, and then I would eat essentially 2 dinners. Yes. Because I would come home so hungry. Yeah. And then my parents, I love them. They packed my lunch every day through senior year, and so I always had enough food for lunch. Yeah. And then you always learn breakfast is the most important meal. So whether it was a bowl of cereal or whatever, and then I always had snacks. I'm a big snacker. Yep. So I think that I definitely made sure that I could tell when my body wasn't fueled. That's good. So I always had food on hand. That's
I couldn't be happier with that. Like that's something that's still to this day with everybody that's coming in here to work out. We talk about that all the time. What'd you have for breakfast this morning? When was the last time you had some food? Like, make sure you get some food after you leave here. Like, it's always reoccurring conversation with everybody here. Okay, so let's transition a bit and we'll talk a little bit more to your parents. Yeah. So, Tim and Suzanne, awesome people, very near and dear to my heart, obviously. Give me a little background to what you know. Did they play sports growing up? Were they athletes growing up? Kind of what was their, kind of their passing it on to you, that love of sport or physical activity?
Yeah, so my dad played sports growing up. He was a baseball player mostly. He was a catcher. Okay. So he knew the sports minded. His sister was a tennis player. Okay. I think his whole family was very active. Yeah. So that was definitely on his side of the family. Yeah. And then my mom danced. Yeah. Her whole life was just, and she actually danced. She was a dancer at Disney. Yeah. So she danced at Disney Japan. And then she was a dancer for a big company in New York, and she just was always very active. Yeah. So that definitely went through all three of us, because my brother and I were soccer. Yeah. And then my sister went the dance route. Yeah. So we definitely got that activeness from them, and I think the competitiveness for sure from both of them. Okay. Yeah. So I think that when we wanted to be in sports, when we were all young, we all tried it all. Yeah. And I definitely stuck to soccer. I danced a really long time.
How long? I think I knew this, but I don't know how long.
Right before I had to make the decision to play select soccer, I was still doing dance, soccer, and gymnastics. Okay. So I think I was probably 8 right before I made the decision, and I chose to play soccer over dance. Yeah. But I think that really helped me because there's so much footwork.
Absolutely.
And my sister played soccer briefly.
Hannah played soccer.
She was a tough cookie.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
She was, but she chose dance, and then my brother played soccer through high school. Yeah. So he just stopped he just went to college and didn't continue. So we all had that drive in us to want to play sports, I think, because of them for sure.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. So what other sports did you play? And how did they kind of did they basically just give you here are the options, or did you just see something and go, I want to do this? Yeah.
Yeah, I think they definitely gave us the opportunity to try anything we wanted to try. Yeah. So I'm grateful that we were able to do that. Yeah. As a kid, all I really remember is playing soccer and dance. Then when I got into middle school, and all these friends are trying other things, I was on the swim team. I was a Cedar Park Typhoon. I actually went to state for backstroke.
No way.
Yes. And then I played volleyball in middle school. And I was actually good. Yeah. I made the A team. Yeah. I played basketball in middle school. I was not good at basketball, but they stuck me on defense. Yeah. And then I ran track. So I did the 100, 200, and 400 meter dash, and then I did high jump and long jump. Gotcha. I really enjoyed the jumps. I didn't like the pressure of having to run. So I only did that. I only did all 3 of those for 1 year, which was 7th grade. And then 8th grade, I did do volleyball again, but that was the only one that I stuck with. Yeah. And then once high school hit, there was no other time to do anything but what you wanted to do.
Absolutely not. I can imagine.
They did convince some people to run track in high school because they needed athletes.
They need warm bodies at that point.
Which actually, in college too, they recruited soccer players to run track as well. But I was I did not like the feeling on that. So no, I tried a lot of sports. Yeah. Which I knew ultimately I was glad that I did. It was fun, and I think it helped build other things I needed for soccer. Yeah. So, and then it gave my parents an excuse to watch even more sports.
Yeah. So speaking of college, talk to me a little bit about not just the recruiting scenario, right, with Coach Hoppa, but and obviously James is a part of that as well. But speak a little bit to how involved your parents were with it. Recruiting process. Was it more than just Auburn at any point in time, really? Because my memory is a little bit hazy. Yeah. But then, how much did your parents talk with you about that during those times, or how much did they kind of leave that up to you?
Yeah. So when I was playing, the recruiting process started really young.
Yeah.
I know they've now since then changed
Yeah.
roles, which I think is probably beneficial for
Sure.
young females. So I really started the recruiting process, I think, my sophomore year of high school. My parents and I sat down and made a list of any schools that I wanted to reach out to. So they sat down with me and we kind of created like a base email and just altered it to the school.
Yep.
So we ended up sending out a ton of emails to different schools that they knew that I wanted to potentially go to school.
Yep.
And then they started to help me go to camps, to the ones that I was serious about.
Okay.
Maybe coaches that had reached back out and
Yeah.
were like, hey, you should come to our ID camp, because those ones are more so invite based off of just like their normal camps.
Yep.
So then as the process kept going, they would take me to those camps, the ones that I felt strongly about going to.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can start calling coaches, and so they would sit down and help me, like, what do you want to know about the school? What, their style of play, maybe like what outside of the soccer program do they offer, like school, is it what you want to do, and all those things. So they supported me and helped guided me through the process the entire time, for sure.
Very cool.
And then ultimately, when I knew I wanted to go to Auburn, I was mostly in contact with Karen Hoppe and Ben, who was the defense coach. I actually wasn't allowed to talk to James.
Interesting.
Because it was a conflict of interest.
That makes sense, yeah.
But if it weren't for him, I probably wouldn't have even known about the school,
Sure.
really. Because Auburn's just in Alabama. So.
Yep.
And we have so many schools in Texas.
Correct.
So I was in contact with a couple smaller schools during that process as well. But I knew ultimately that I wanted to go to a school that had a big football team.
Yep.
Because we had grown up, all surrounded by sports.
Yep.
And so once again, I sat down with my parents and I made a list of all the things I looked for in a school. And that's kind of how ultimately Auburn came to my final decision. Was that I wanted to be at a school that had all these things.
Yeah, very cool. That's I talk about that with the kids in here that are, on that path of, there's going to be 3 or 4 things that really stick out to you at most. Like, do you want to be at a big school? Do you want that, massive athletic development department, like, life where we go support everybody on the weekends, or do you need that? How much do you need to be in a big town or a small town, or insert all these things here. So that recruiting process and just whittling down what's important to each person. I think parents can be, obviously they know you best, right? So like helping you make that decision, helping you whittle down what things matter most to you. That's awesome. Yeah,
I think too, once I decided that Auburn they were also excited because they love football. And once you go to the campus, it's just unreal. And so they were excited to continue to go back to this place. So
that's very cool. So played 2 years at Auburn, right? What was your decision like there? What was your experience like, first off, and as a college athlete? And then ultimately, what made you decide to kind of call it a day and focus on studies? Yeah.
So we've been talking about this whole process.
Yeah.
And you can hear how tedious it is and how much hard work it takes, and it really is exhausting.
Yeah.
So it's crazy. You work for, what I worked for was to play soccer in college.
Yeah.
And I got to college
10, 11 years
and
of work,
we started June of 2016. So I went in the summer and they try to prepare you by taking summer classes, and then you have workouts every single morning at 6 a.m.
Yeah.
So I went into it, I was very excited, and I was part of a really good team, had good coaches, but I was just mentally, I think my brain was just over the whole thing after going through a whole season. So my first year, I was redshirted.
Yep, I remember that.
Which actually did relieve, it was a little bit relieving for me because I was like, I don't know that I'm ready to be on this field. Yeah. I was very small, so I gained 13 pounds of muscle my first year there.
And we talked about this a lot
crazy.
Beforehand about because that last, I think the last 2 years of your youth career was probably we spent the most time together. Yeah. Preparing for this, right? Yeah. Beat test running, lifting, acceleration training, stuff like that. Absolutely, yeah.
I think that knowing you're going to play college soccer and then getting there and not playing is really tough because you feel like you've worked so long for this, and now there's only 10 players on the field and a goalie. You're playing with 4 years worth of people. So 18-year-old me was playing against potentially a 23-year-old girl. So it was just a lot to take in at once, for sure. And I know that whatever feelings I was going through, my parents were also going through it. So when I was excited, I called my parents and was like, I had a really good practice, I feel really good about this. Then they were excited. But then I'd call them a week later and be like, I just feel really discouraged. I'm putting in all this work and there's no reward. So then they would feel that as well. So they were definitely the biggest support system, and I wouldn't have gotten through it probably without them. And there's a lot of talk about mental health in college athletes these days, and it's just, thankfully I was mentally prepared for it because of club soccer, I think. So in that aspect I was fine, but I was just drained trying to squeeze in everything, and then your social life in college is even bigger. But we couldn't really partake in any of it because of, one, how the program was run, and two, just because you were always so busy. We had practices, obviously every day. They could be 3 hours, they could be 4 hours, just depending on time. And 3 of the days you would have to find time between classes to go lift weights. Which was all what you needed to be successful, but it was very, very tough for sure. And so when year 2 came around, my redshirt year was over, so I was really looking forward to getting to play. And from a personal standpoint and what the coaches were telling me, I was doing a really good job and I had deserved to be on that field, but yet I never made the field. I did occasionally. So once again, I was putting in all the work, I was doing everything, and I felt like, this is my time, and then still wasn't getting what I felt like I had earned. And so by Christmas time, I was like, I am burnt out. I'm not happy anymore. I have lost the love of the sport because I'm so worried about every other piece of it. And I want to get to experience football at Auburn, and with all that came in, I had decided, I think best for me, I had decided to quit. And I remember vividly, I was on a road trip home when I was thinking about all these things, and I'm a big lister. So I was making lists, pros and cons, and just things like that. I was also a walk-on. And so not having that financial aspect, that wasn't even a part of it.
It makes a decision easier.
If I had, money on the line, it probably would have been a whole different conversation. I remember when I decided to tell my parents, of course they were very reluctant at first, as most parents would be, because they were like, well, you've worked for this your whole life. Are you sure this is what you want to do? And I talked through it with them, and, kept talking about it, and we kept talking about it, and I went through the lists of everything that I had found that was better for me. And then, at some point they had just, like, it sounds like you've made your decision, so we're going to support whatever you decide to do. And then they helped me with whatever I wanted to do next. So that was kind of the process of how it all came about.
That's very cool. Like I again, knowing them as well as I do, I think that I don't know if you could ask for 2 better people to have in your corner in that situation when, they've got 10, 11 years invested as well, right? From a time, money, kind of emotional standpoint, keeping you, nudging you there, and then to see you get to that point, and then to see you kind of have to struggle at the amount of empathy I know the 2 of them have in general, just for people, let alone their daughter, right? Like it really speaks to making sure that as a parent, they remember that, you are the priority there, not what they've done, not what they've put into it from a money or time standpoint, and that if they've done their job well, which they clearly have, you can sit there and make a rational, decision about something, and they can back you up on it and go, this is going to make her happy. She's not happy. Her happiness comes first. And if she was happy playing, that'd be great, or happy in the situation where she's still fighting, that'd be fine. But because she's not happy and she's decided this is her option, we can back this up because they're just fantastic people.
Totally. And they had seen throughout those 2
Well, yeah,
years.
how often did they come see you? They
Came all the time,
Yeah.
even whether or not I was playing.
Sure.
They were excited to be a part of the environment,
Yeah.
and my first year, since I was redshirted, I was the best cheerleader of all time. So they still enjoyed getting to see all of that.
Yeah.
And I didn't travel because I was a redshirt, and so it did give me the opportunity to go see them every so often,
Yep.
which I wouldn't have had that
Yeah.
chance for sure. But those times when I would just call them and I was just deflated,
Yeah.
it wasn't like a complete blindside. I
Yeah, there
think
wasn't
by
out
the
of the
time
blue,
I had
right?
made the decision,
Yeah, that's fair.
I don't think they were expecting it, but
Yeah.
they definitely weren't like completely shocked by my decision. I think.
Yeah, that's fair. They had seen it coming. Basically,
Yeah.
And had it wasn't something so brand new in their head that it couldn't have been a possibility.
Right.
Yeah. So then you finished and you got your degree in what, elementary ed.
Mhm.
Okay. So you're back
Yeah.
home.
Back home. So after college, I got a degree in elementary education, and then COVID actually hit my senior spring. So I graduated, but I feel like I didn't graduate because we didn't.
Just kind of just came
Yeah,
home.
I didn't even get to finish my student teaching.
Yeah.
So and then I actually moved out to Colorado for 2 years.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
And now I'm back.
Yeah.
So I'm very happy to be back for
Yeah.
sure too.
Very cool. What do they think of you being a teacher?
I think they're not surprised at all. I, as a little kid, would set up my toys and dolls and teach them, and I've always wanted to do it. And,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
so
really cool. That's really cool.
Nobody's surprised.
Nobody's
by it.
surprised by that? Okay.
No.
Okay. Well, let's wrap up with kind of, I don't know, a funny story about them, whether it's involving you or not, preferably involving you, or best memory of kind of your youth athletic days and involving your parents, like something that stands out maybe in your head as far as.
I have a story from my mommy and my dad.
Okay, great,
So,
awesome.
I don't know if I was in middle school or high school, but I used to do soccer training before school at
Okay.
6 a.m. over at, I think, Aaron Metzger's place.
Metzger's place, yeah.
So it started at 6, and nobody wants to eat breakfast that early. So every morning my dad would pull into a gas station and he would let me eat an oatmeal cream pie because he said it had
Oh my gosh, I love
he
those.
said it had oatmeal in it, so it's like breakfast. And so I think it was only on Friday mornings. So Friday mornings, every morning for breakfast, I'd eat a nice oatmeal cream pie.
Oh my god, I love those.
And I'll never forget that because every time I eat one now, I'm like, this isn't even bad. It's just oatmeal.
That's awesome.
And then my mom, I was probably 7 or 8 because I was still playing 8v8. And I was playing up at the time.
Yeah.
So my parents are on the sidelines, they're in their chairs. I think we're at a tie game. I was a midfielder at the time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know if someone's doing a throw in a route, but I'm by the sideline and my parents right there, and my mom's like, you got this, come on. And I turned around and I looked at her and I shushed her in front of all of the parents. And I don't think she probably would know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I kind of shushed both of them because they were both like, come on, let's go. And I was like so in the zone and didn't want them talking to me. I turned around and I was like, shh. And they're like, so I'll definitely never forget that either.
You shushed your own mom at a
I
game.
did.
I love it.
After all they did, I still shushed them.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
You love them.
I do, for sure.
Awesome. This was fun. This was so much fun. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, very good catching up for sure.
Yeah.
Guys, thanks very much for hanging out with us, and we will see you next time. Take care.